This is Facets of Connection, where we are transforming relationships within an evolving world. Brought to you by Relational Life Foundation and hosted by me, Sarah Melissa Oswald. This exclusive podcast series delves into the heart of human connection, exploring how we learn, love, and collaborate within a dynamic society. We'll uncover the power of respectful relationships and their essential role in the human experience. I invite you to embark on a journey with me to create a more connected, empathic world for future generations. Today's guest is Dr. Jae Sevelius, the Senior Research Strategist at Relational Life Foundation. Jae is a licensed clinical psychologist, professor, and nationally recognized researcher whose career has focused on the intersections of mental health, social justice, and community empowerment. Over the past 2 decades, Jae has led pioneering studies at Columbia University Medical Center, advancing interventions that foster healing, equity, and authentic connection in marginalized communities. Jae guides the research vision for Relational Life Therapy, a transformative therapeutic approach centered on respect, equality, and relational healing. Their work is focused not only on expanding the evidence base for RLT, but also on scaling its reach. Alongside this effort, Jae weaves their expertise in innovative areas like psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, opening new possibilities for how relational healing can evolve. Jae brings both rigorous scientific insight and a deep personal passion for relational health into this conversation. We'll explore their journey into this work, where RLT research stands today, and the vision for expanding its impact, while also highlighting the critical role of community support and fundraising in bringing this vision to life. And with that, here we go. Welcome, Jae. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the Facets of Connection podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
I'm thrilled you're here. I think the two of us will have a conversation that will inspire people to learn more about what's happening at Relational Life Foundation and all the research that's taking place.
Sounds great. I'm excited.
As we launch into that conversation, can you just take a moment to introduce yourself and share with our audience whatever you feel is essential to knowing who you are and what's important?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Jae Sevelius. I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm a licensed psychologist in New York and California, where I call both places home. I'm currently based at the Columbia University Medical Center, where I'm a professor of medical psychology in the Department of Psychiatry. And I've been conducting research for probably 2 decades now, looking at different modes of promoting healthcare by leveraging peer type relationships, community relationships, and I'm really interested in how relationships can improve health and how we can create programs and interventions and ways of thinking that help people live healthier lives by being healthier in community.
It sounds like such a great fit for everything that I do as well.
Great.
Not the research part, but I know relational life therapy recently fell into your lap in terms of a project to get involved in. And I'm curious, what had you feel inspired to say yes to that? What inspired you to engage in the work with researching relational life therapy at this moment in your career?
Well, I'm really passionate about using my research skills to help people in community who are, walking the walk, really, who are practicing all of the skills and teaching the skills and creating the programs to help our communities thrive. And I think the kind of synergy between what Terry has created with relational life therapy and this incredible vast pool of very passionate practitioners, and then my research skills with really I've been conducting many clinical trials to establish evidence for various types of therapies and interventions. We have very complementary skill sets. And when I first met Terry, I was, of course, really struck by his passion, how he articulated what RLT is and his vision for it. But really, what ended up convincing me was just listening to a few of the webinar series, some of the case series presentations, and hearing from practitioners of RLT about what a difference it's made in the lives of their clients.
Almost everyone I speak to that has studied relational life therapy says that it's
Mhm.
been completely transformative to the lives of their clients, but also to their own personal lives, and that it's a model unlike any other in a number of ways.
I could say what I'm struck by in terms of the difference between what I see between relational life therapy and some of the modalities that I have studied is I find that RLT really emphasizes directness, authenticity in the room, and this idea of very active coaching around rupture and repair, and really teaching people in the moment, how to show up with authenticity and how to claim their own power. And I find that a lot of, especially newer clinicians, so, in schools, people are taught, how to be great listeners, how to reflect really well, but feel less confident with active tools. And I feel like RLT is so good at teaching people tools around how to be active in the session as a clinician.
Yeah, it really gives clinicians the permission to bring their full selves into the room, to speak the truth with love in a way that other therapeutic modalities actually say, no, clinician, don't bring your personhood, don't take sides, right? There's a lot of rules of therapy that RLT actually claims to break. And that's why I think that's part of why it works really well.
Yes, I agree. And I also think it's part of why I can see, again, not being a certified RLT practitioner myself, but hoping actually to go down that path because I'm so moved by, the results that I see and the passion that I see among its practitioners. But I think part of what excites me about it is that I can really see how the principles of RLT can translate beyond the couples therapy room, and how much we need those skills, especially in our culture at this time. And I think a lot about communities and, showing up in communities, healing in community. And I'm really passionate about group therapy as well. And I just can really see how some of the principles of RLT translate so well to different settings and even to briefer interventions. And that excites me in terms of scalability.
I am right there with you, Jay. I mean, it is the number one reason that I founded Relational Life Foundation. And I saw potential for this model to go so far beyond the way that it's currently taught to work with couples. Yes, I work with couples. I teach relationship skills. I'm a coach with couples and individuals. But this model is teaching respectful relationships. And that is something that our world across the entire planet is in desperate need of.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think about different kinds of relationships too, parent-child relationships, healthcare provider-patient relationships. If folks can learn how to be relational in one context, I think it will translate to other contexts in their lives as well, and will ultimately make for a healthier society.
Mhm. Specifically, I'm called to mention the power dynamics that RLT addresses, looking at the one up and one down power dynamics of shame and grandiosity. That
Mhm.
RLT teaches that no human being could possibly be better or less than another, that we all have the same inherent worth and value simply for being alive on this planet. And that alone can transform our world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the research. I can speak a bit to what's taken place so far. The director of research who has recently transitioned on is Kathy Hill. And Kathy created two studies that have been completed already. Where are we now, Jay? Where does research stand currently, and what's the future look like?
Yes, I think it's at a really exciting place. Kathy has done an incredible job really systematizing the training program and coming up with some really important measures of how the training happens and what types of skills that trainees come out of relational life therapy certification programs with, which is really great to kind of have that foundation of, these are skills that can be taught. These are skills that can be systematized and measured and reflect a certain level of competence once someone is certified. And so we're in the process of, I'm supporting Kathy in getting those studies published. The second one is around the grid, the relationship grid, which you mentioned before along those two axes. And so that one is also in process. And currently, we're planning a year-long effectiveness study where we're looking at real-world implementation of RLT among well-trained practitioners, looking at pre and post outcomes among their clients, and seeing how and if relational life therapy improves things like relationship satisfaction, communication skills in the context of relationship, reduces conflict. So we'll be measuring many different outcomes and hopefully starting to really establish an evidence base for RLT, getting it published in the peer-reviewed literature, and thereby being able to get it out into training programs like graduate programs, MFT programs.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, why the heck is evidence-based important? What does that mean? You just answered it. If RLT is going to be taught within master's programs, it needs to be deemed as evidence-based.
Correct.
Do you want to
Yeah,
say anything more about that?
just basically that, every modality, every therapeutic modality starts out as an idea, a concept, a theory, as someone's vision, someone's practice, and it evolves into a more kind of systematized, coherent modality like RLT. This is really Terry Real taking what he learned. None of these things are created from thin air, obviously. It's, as far as you can speak to this better than I can, but RLT is informed by feminist theory, borrows some principles from other modalities like solution-focused therapy, but ultimately it's a coherent modality of therapy that has evolved over time, continues to evolve, just like any other therapeutic modality, that then needs to be tested using systematic research methods to establish that it is effective across different contexts, across different providers. It's not just a Terry Real effect.
Uh-huh. That's an important piece. Part of my mission has been to increase the legacy of RLT, to live beyond Terry Real's life, and to make sure that other practitioners are able to have an impact using the modality is essential.
Yes, absolutely. And the practice base is so strong that people who practice RLT or couples who have had the RLT therapist know that it works. But until we have the research evidence and that data that we can really look to objectively and say, here's the data, here's the evidence, then graduate schools that have to be accredited by an accredited body. Not all programs obviously are accredited, but accredited programs is where, really where we want to see this evolve. And they teach evidence-based practices. So it'll be our job to build that evidence base for RLT so that we can get it into schools and get people trained beyond the current training program.
So you're saying that the training program itself, Relational Life Institute, could become an accredited program.
Yes, it could. It could.
Huh.
And clearly it's already a certification that therapists can take. And there's a lot of rigor built into that program, thanks to,
There already is.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks to your work and the work of the RLF team and folks who have worked really hard to get this level of rigor into the training program. And so that is a really, really important foundational work to build the evidence base, because without a rigorous training program, you don't have those trained practitioners in order to really study its implementation effectively.
Agreed. And I have to credit Kathy Hill. I
Mhm.
have to mention her here because she served both as the director of research for the foundation and stepped into director of training at the Institute. And she knew what we would need in order to properly research this model. And so she actually redesigned the training program to ensure that Relational Life Institute was producing extremely well trained and vetted therapists so
Mm,
that we could research.
that's incredible. Yeah. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, no kidding. That was a huge, huge task. And
So important.
I think she did a great job. You know, one of our early supporters of this work, of the research in particular, was trying to help me be able to communicate the importance of research. And when I'm speaking to potential funders for the research, early on, I had a hard time communicating how exciting it was. And she helped me see how sexy research is. Because if we understand what exactly works about this model, so that practitioners who are using it and then teaching it to others down the road know exactly why it works, the modality will continue to work into the future.
Mhm, mhm. And
And
continue to evolve.
and continue to evolve.
Mhm.
But as you were saying, is this something that only Terry Real can do effectively, or is it something that others can learn and implement? And
Yeah,
so using research to really assess what works about it will help ensure the future of RLT stays intact as a model that's effective.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's always going to be a role for the RLT certification program. But what is important about getting it into graduate schools is that people get exposure early on to the model. I know there are graduate level faculty who don't think that early career trainees and clinicians can do couples therapy. I mean, I literally have talked to people who say, "Oh, yeah, you need to practice with individuals for 10 years before you can do couples because it's just so hard, it's so challenging." And with RLT, we know that's not true. And that people just need skills and tools and supervision and reinforcement of what they're doing. What Kathy was speaking to in terms of if we know why RLT works, sometimes we talk about that as like, what are the intervention mechanisms? What is it about these micro interventions in the room that we can kind of isolate and start to understand, like, oh, RLT is working through a slightly different mechanism than other modalities. And once we can sort of start to isolate those, we can amplify them and see, does that change the outcome? Can we isolate them and make them into micro interventions or briefer interventions for different contexts? And so you start to really see how RLT can be an organic, growing modality and evolve because it's research informed.
What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities ahead of us? We've set out a goal of wanting to be in 50 plus universities by 2030. I don't know if that's actually possible. You probably have a better sense. But what are the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead over the next couple of years?
Well, I think that this is an ambitious goal, and I think it's great to have ambitious goals. I think it's entirely possible. And I think that it's a huge opportunity because I think that RLT really aligns with a lot of the competencies that graduate programs want to see students graduate with, like being trauma informed, being able to work with diverse relationship styles, be able to implement evidence based practices. I think some of the challenges are things like ensuring that we have the funding that we need to get the research going, because unfortunately, there's reductions in funding for research in general. And I don't know that a lot of the the big federal funders really understand the value of relational type interventions. Like when we think about, like I mentioned, healthcare settings, being able to get this type of training into lots of different kinds of programs at the graduate school level. But, graduate programs are packed in terms of the curricula. And so establishing RLT as evidence-based and also really communicating the value to different contexts and be able to train in these briefer ways to get people excited and wanting to learn more will really expand its reach.
Through pioneering research on relational life therapy, we've witnessed individuals, couples, and entire communities transform from isolation and discord to connection and resilience. By continuing this work, donors help multiply these stories of hope and growth for people who need it most. When donors invest in RLT research, they are not just supporting studies, they're helping build an evidence-based approach to relational and mental health that can be integrated into schools, into clinics, and communities nationwide. This is how real social change gets sustained. Funding RLT research directly expands access to sliding scale or free therapy for under-resourced groups and individuals, advancing Relational Life Foundation's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's about ensuring high-quality relational health support, reaching every corner of society. Every contribution helps us move closer to the goal of bringing RLT to 50 educational programs by 2030. Supporters are not just donors, they're partners in a movement making respectful, healthy relationships possible for the next generation. Support today allows us to explore innovative frontiers, like the intersection of RLT and psychedelic-assisted therapy. Donor support fuels research that could unlock new evidence-based pathways for healing trauma and building community. Investing in RLT isn't just about individual therapy. Every dollar fuels work that builds stronger families, more connected communities, and greater well-being on a larger scale. Part of the work I do at the foundation is reviewing applications for a scholarship program that gives people who work with more diverse audiences and are using RLT in more creative communities and ways, and also those who might not be able to afford the training itself, an opportunity to go and receive the practitioner training for a 50% rate at the Institute. And what I hear from this group of applicants, it's my real lens on why practitioners are drawn to this work. And I don't know why I'm inspired to share this based on what you just said, but practitioners seem to get that working with couples is really challenging, or it can be if they don't have the right skill sets or tools given to them. And they see something in RLT that shoots them leaps and bounds over the training that they've received in their master's programs. And they say, I actually need this in order to be effective in my work. I can't work with couples without RLT.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they see that it's going to up-level their ability to serve and to support couples in actually having successful relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the
Absolutely.
feedback I get is that, yes, it actually impacts not just their practice growing, but their couples. It impacts the success that their couples see in their lives.
Yeah, I really can feel that and see that. In my own training, I feel like I got incredible training in conceptualizing cases,
Huh.
but the real time interventions in the room, it took a long time for me to really feel masterful with those in the moment kind of ways of intervening. Just based on the limited training that I've gotten in RLT, I feel like Terry does an amazing job of really both like modeling and naming what he's doing in the room to shift the dynamics, to provoke insight, to really use himself and his presence, his experience in the room, and his relationships with the clients. And I feel like that has been really revolutionary for me to learn about and listen to, and has made me a better therapist just in the short time that I've been learning about RLT.
So you practice with clients as well.
I do, yes. I have a very small faculty practice through Columbia.
Nice. And what is it exactly that has transformed your practice that's made you a better therapist? Just out of curiosity.
Honestly, some of it is just the permission to be real and to be direct. And I thought I was doing that before,
Mm.
but the more that I listen to Terry and the more that I have listened to and seen some of the videos where people are working with couples in real time, the live demonstrations have been really incredible. Really being able to observe those micro interventions in the moment and have those modeled and understand how it shifts some of the dynamics in the room kind of instantaneously it's just sort of changed how I think about my own micro interventions in therapy sessions. And I love the way that Terry speaks about working with grandiosity, with both compassion and with real urgency. Like these are dynamics that really are calling for this type of therapy in our culture right now.
I'm careful on this podcast to not go political, but it's hard not to when we're talking about grandiosity in our culture. I don't know if that's political or just cultural, but at this time in history, we are seeing a resurgence of some of the worst forms of dominance that shows how significant this work could be if adopted by groups that are seeing themselves as power over others.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And the styles of communication that you see happening, in the media, even in families, that this idea that like there is one right way, there's one right way to think about this. I know the right way, and anybody else who doesn't agree with me is wrong. And I think that's true on all sides, that we need more skills to be able to communicate across differences, to be able to experience rupture in our relationships and know how to repair and be willing to sit in the discomfort of a rupture. And, I'll just speak personally, it has really affected my own family. And it's very, very challenging to experience these things so close to home in the ways that this current cultural moment plays out, in our personal relationships. And it takes a lot of willingness to communicate and to hold space for differences.
That's it. To hold space for differences, to recognize that there can be more than one objective reality.
Yes.
You have your own objective reality, and I have mine. And RLT uses that framework all the time with couples.
Hmm.
And I think that translates really well to even our political system. How do we stay in relationship and in conversation with people who seem to be so far from how we see the world? Can we respect that they have a different worldview? And how do we be in relationship with another human being when their objective reality seems so different than ours?
Hmm.
And RLT actually shows that it's possible.
Absolutely. And the way that I've seen in some of those live demonstrations, the way that couples can actually come back from the brink
Mm,
of of unrepairable rupture to repair and to communication and back into intimacy and connection gives me hope for our culture at large, that it's possible to feel like we're on the brink of being broken. Because things do feel broken. And the more of us who can do the work for ourselves, do the work in our relationships, do the work in our families, I feel like it gives me hope.
yeah, if we start at home, there's a ripple effect.
Yes.
And on the flip side, we could literally take these skill sets and bring them to the world at large,
Yes.
potentially. Potentially. That's going to
Yeah,
be a very skillful intervention needed, but I think it's possible.
I do too. And I
Mhm.
think that's why
That's
we're
what's
here.
kept me going. Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
same.
Mhm. Another thing that is different about RLT is the eighth lens that Terry added just within the last few years. And it's a systems lens, the eighth lens, and it encourages practitioners to think about the cultural implications that are impacting the couple, the individuals in the couple, and the couple as a unit. And to think about the systems that surround them and the trauma that those cultures have endured and how that weaves itself into their relationship dynamics. And a lot of therapeutic modalities don't take that into account at all. Has
Yeah.
that impacted your interest in working with RLT at all? Just curious.
I feel like it was almost a prerequisite for
Hmm.
working with RLT, to be
I know
honest.
a little bit about your background, Jay. And so tell me, what was it that made that prerequisite for you?
I'm a psychologist, and therapy in our culture tends to be very individually focused. We think a lot in terms of individual solutions. But my research has largely been with queer and trans communities, LGBT communities, lots of work with transgender people in particular. And that really does require systems level thinking and really thinking a lot about the structural barriers to healthcare, to employment, and the systems that impact trans people, the family systems, and ways that trans people experience being invalidated really by the systems around them, by culture, often by family, experiencing things like familial rejection, sometimes at very young ages, which then leads to things like homelessness. And so those are some of the kind of processes that I've been studying and really thinking about what types of interventions and programs that can we create to develop safety nets for folks who are experiencing these kind of structural level oppressions. And my work has really shown me that it's in relationships that we're often traumatized, and it's relationships that we heal. And, experiencing that affirmation from various sources, whether it's a therapist, a healthcare provider, a friend, chosen family, or a community that people feel connected to, it's incredibly healing. And so my work has really been around creating some of those structures for people in which to heal some of the trauma they've experienced.
Yeah, what you said was we experience trauma through relationship and we heal through relationship. That's the whole thing right there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want to broaden our conversation out a little bit to look at the research as a whole and the future for it. So, if you're listening to this and thinking, gosh, I really want to get involved in this, Jay, how would you say that investing in research on RLT ultimately serves the broader field of mental health and community well being?
Well, I think that, investing in relational life therapy research, it builds a reproducible, teachable method that cuts across various settings from private practice to safety net clinics. Once we get this into schools, the RLT practitioners will go to impact all kinds of systems and practice in all kinds of settings. And that's probably true now with RLT practitioners, but I think it really broadens the impact and the reach of RLT and turns relational science into trainable skills at scale.
Every single person who goes through a master's program to become a counselor, a therapist, social worker could have these skill sets in their pocket.
Absolutely. And we just need the evidence to convince the institutions, healthcare systems, to show that it's an evidence-based practice that is worth teaching in all kinds of settings.
Mhm. I know you have experience with psychedelic research. Do you want to share a bit about how that informs your perspective on RLT? We've had some conversation about the possibility of RLT being researched alongside MDMA or other psychedelics. What gets you jazzed about that? How could those intersections enhance the relational healing for future generations?
I get so excited to talk about this.
Okay, great.
Um, I'll start by saying, psychedelics aren't for everyone. Just because there is really great evidence that's building around psychedelics, they're not for everyone, and that's important to say out the gate. But for those who can benefit from psychedelics, in a nutshell, psychedelics increase psychological flexibility. So it opens this window, sometimes referred to as like neuroplastic window, neuroplasticity, where the brain is really open to new ways of thinking, forming new patterns. And that's why it's a really great intervention for things like depression that can almost be like a rut in the brain, ways of thinking that really repeat themselves over and over again. So really getting people out of those ruts. And similarly, something like MDMA that increases self-compassion, compassion for others, reduces fear in the moment. So people can really revisit trauma, they can revisit relational injuries without a lot of fear or that feeling of being triggered. So when MDMA is paired with therapy, not only can you work with it in session to kind of work through some of that, the repair work that might seem challenging without the MDMA, it also can kind of extend that period of work where people are really able to work with the insight that they gain during the psychedelic session to integrate more work in the relational context outside of the MDMA itself. We're doing a study right now of practitioners who work underground with MDMA assisted therapy in couples. There are some folks who worked with couples prior to MDMA being scheduled as a federally controlled substance. And
Back in what, the 70s?
yes, exactly. So luckily, we still have some of those elders with us who can speak to what it was like at that time. There's a wealth of wisdom in folks who work incredibly ethically with really incredible boundaries, lots of regard to safety, but believe in the medicine so much that work in a way that is not above ground. But we really want to learn from the wisdom and to inform future clinical trials of MDMA assisted couples therapy. And that's actually how I came to know RLT.
Yeah, I knew that. That's so cool, Jay. I really hope that RLT weaves its way into working with psychedelics. I
I
know
think
that
it would be a brilliant match.
I really do too.
Yes, I think it would be incredible for so many reasons. MDMA is also known for working really well for people who are struggling with trauma. And I think relational life therapy is a really amazing way to work with individual experiences of trauma in the context of relationships. And I think MDMA has a nice synergy with that.
Would you want to share anything with our audience about how to stay in touch with you or how to learn more about the research? We can put that in the show notes. If there's any parting words that you'd like to leave with our listeners.
Absolutely. I'm easy to find online, Jae Sevelius at Columbia University, and I can put my, links in the show notes on how to find me. And if anybody has any questions about the research or wants to find out more about how they can support the research, I'm always open to chatting with folks and exploring those connections.
Thanks so much, Jay. I'm
Thanks,
thrilled
Sarah.
you're here working on the research for RLF.
Me too. Me too. It's really been amazing to get to know you and everybody at RLF, and I feel really blessed to be able to do this work.
We're going to do some fun stuff together.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for being on this show.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Facets of Connection. This show is brought to you by Relational Life Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to ending the chronic epidemic of loneliness by fostering community and transforming relationships. Its mission is focused on building stronger, more connected communities through research on relational health and through accessible therapeutic services and education. If you'd like to support this work, visit relationallifefoundation.org. Your generosity helps us make relational support available and accessible to more communities. On another note, I'd love to hear from you. Whether you've taken a workshop through Relational Life Foundation, if you're working with an RLT therapist, or simply if you have a guest or a topic to recommend for a future episode of Facets of Connection. I want to know, what's resonating with you? What's shifting? Or what are you still sitting with? Send me a quick voice memo or an email to Sarah with an H at facetsofconnection.com. Your story might even be featured in a future episode. I look forward to hearing from you. Facets of Connection is created by me, Sarah Melissa Oswald. Our executive producer is Carrie Allison Maloney, and our digital producer is Kim Novak. Follow us here on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts. Thank you in advance for your support. See you soon.